welcome to our three-way conversation as part of the Jorvik Viking Thing 2021, which is now online, normally the Jorvik Viking Festival. And today we are having a conversation about plant magic, about scent, and about the lore from our homelands. With me is Lindy who most of you know and love and cherish from her singing. She is obviously a vocalist with Vardruna, also a solo recording artist with an album out recently, Seafarer, and it's lovely to have her with us. Also, we have Johanna Elf is joining in the conversation, and Lindy and Johanna are friends, and Johanna is the founder and creator of Cult Botanic, which is does amazing things with plants and plant magic and herbalism. She's a certified herbalist. And there's me, I'm Christina Oakley Harrington, and I am the founder of Treadwell's Bookshop. And I recently put out a book called The Treadwell's Book of Folk Magic. And we are delighted to be chatting with one another. Our conversation is going to run a little under an hour. And the kind of things that we're hoping to explore and go in deeply is the Viking heritage of working with plants and charms and trees, and all of that is well known to, I think, a lot of this audience. And what we're going to try to do in this conversation is think about and explore how those things have come down to us in our respective lives. Johanna grew up around Stockholm and spent some time in the archipelago there. And Lindy is from an island on the west coast of Norway, just outside of Bergen. I moved to England when I was 26, and that's where I really got into plants at that age, from the culture, the land around, funnily enough, around London. So there is this long heritage from the early medieval period, and certainly we've got Vikings and settlers coming from Scandinavia to Scotland and the north of England and the Orkneys. And some of that trickles down. It really does trickle down. And so I'm going to open up the conversation and start by saying, Lindy, when we spoke a little bit earlier, you were saying that some of your early memories around plants are your walks with your grandfather on the island. And you're from the Green Island, are we right?
Yes, it's called actually the Green Island, from the aviators from World War II. When I came from England, they navigated often after the island because it was so green. So it's lush and green, and not many trees at that time, but the whole island, they said, it reminded them of Ireland in a way, the same type of greenery. And that is because, so I asked, why did they call it? How can it be greener than the other islands that are around? And I was told it's because the way how it lays in between the other islands. So it's kind of sheltered. So the earth, there is something with the earth also that makes things grow or something like that.
You were saying that it's in an area where there's not a lot of trees, but it is greener than some of the other islands, and you've got the scent and the plants and the flowers, and is that a big impact on you?
Yeah, absolutely. And they did actually plant trees at some point during the 60s, and now they're trying to cut the trees down because they don't, depending what kind of trees it is. So some trees is kind of like Rowans are naturally growing there. They are not cutting those away. Mm-hmm. But they thought that Norway did not the wise thing. I think it was in the 60s. And my father was within the planting projects. They got kids at school to plant trees, and that was the what do you call it? So some kind of spruce, Christmas trees. You know.
Okay.
But the thing is with that tree is that it spreads all over.
Yeah.
And so now it's become a problem. So now people get paid to cut it down again. Okay. Yeah, but there are a lot of other very lovely trees, super lot of plants, and every summer when I lived there, I used to go and listen to music alone in the night, and certain areas smelled it was I don't know, like this night blooming flowers.
Mm-hmm.
They have in the tropics, but they also have it in Nordic countries. Some other types, I guess. But
That's so cool. We're going to come back to Rowans, and I'm so struck by, we have the Rowans both in Sweden and in Norway and in England. So, and I'm crazy about them. So we'll come back to them. Johanna, how did it start for you? When you sent me, we were having a little conversation over email about haunted houses and giant gardens, and I thought, I want to hear about giant houses and haunted houses and gardens and wandering through them, and your grandmother. Is that how it started for you?
Yeah, I think so. I was staying with my grandmother for weeks on end from a really early age, and I loved it. I loved going there. Throughout her life, she lived in quite interesting places. It's like she seeked them out, and this particular one was this like a country mansion in the middle of nowhere in the southeast of Sweden, and it was supposedly haunted, which she loved about it. But she has always been really into plants and herbs. You know, that kind of person that you can't take anywhere because she'll like nick a little cutting of everything. Like she'd go mad in Kew Gardens, you know, that kind of person. So she always grew these big gardens and herb gardens, and that was really important. So one of my earliest plant scent memories is she grew carrots with calendulas. And I so strongly remember the taste and smell of these carrots. Like they had this sweet floral taste almost. And I still think today, if I come across like really good quality organic carrots, I think of calendula because of that. And then on the top floor in the same house was a glass conservatory, which she used as a greenhouse. And me and her used to climb through there and have these like secret picnics on the roof. And then that greenhouse was full of these huge rose geraniums. And so I think that movement through there just reminds me so much. It made me really love the scent of rose geranium and this really strong, spicy, lemony scent that comes from the leaves when you touch them. And it's weird because I don't recall any flowers. It was more the leaves, and so that's a really early one as well. And then I think because I had it from two directions, because then I also partly grew up in the archipelago, which is completely different landscape. Potentially a mix of what maybe where Lindy's from and the forest, and you have this, it's almost like forest going straight down on rock into the water. It's truly a magical place. But that was our playground, so nature was what we didn't really have. Our parents gave us like a few plastic animals and that was it. And then, so it was a big part of growing up, really, that nature was so accessible.
This makes me think about nature spirits. And Johanna, you were saying that there are these customs that you mentioned to me, which I hadn't had. Obviously, I didn't grow up in Scandinavia, but like leaving bits of porridge out for spirits, and or baking things at certain times. And was there this sense that, like, whether or not people believed in it, there were little things that or that some people would do with a sense of there being nature spirits or plant spirits or maybe even unidentified beings?
I think it's quite an old school thing, the leaving porridge for gnomes. I think it's a common thing in the countryside, and I think people still do it, and it's around Christmas often, but it's not really to do with Christmas. It's not about Santa, it's about the house gnome. And that being that looks after the house and leaving little things for that being. But then apparently you're not meant to spoil him, because if you give too much or there was somebody that made like new clothes for him, then apparently he gets really proud and won't do any work anymore, and he won't look after the house anymore. So that's quite a sweet thing. But otherwise I feel for us, it was a lot to do with the forest and more being respectful and cautious. And I think we were thinking about trolls and the forest row and the notion of that they could come and swap the family's baby. And I think they were always present, whether it was just an exciting thing to want to believe in, or rather than being very cautious, but it was still there, talked about when I was growing up anyway.
Wow.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's amazing. Lindy, and how about you? How was it on your island?
It was, when we walked, we had, it took us 40 minutes or so to go through a very hilly landscape down to the ocean. And if my grandfather, for example, was with us, he told us about, you see those trees there? That's the troll, because the troll went out in the sunshine, and then they go to stone, but he just tweaked them into getting into a tree or something.
Okay.
And one very specific figure is, of course, Rowan. He's the guy you have to really watch out for if you're down by the ocean. And the interest now he's a guy, but early in the Viking age, he was they called the draug, could also be, it was only a dead spirit or someone that was haunting. But nowadays it's more aimed for what do you call it? What do you call it, Johanna? Like a spøkelse?
Like a sea spirit, or
that's the spirit. It's not exactly a ghost. It's more like almost like the Flying Dutchman, but not quite. He has a small boat. He has a boat that we have here on the Norwegian coast, smaller boat, but with sails. And that I've heard with others also that grew up on islands or by the coast of Norway. Everybody has heard about Draugen, and they have different kind of stories about how he looked like.
Was your island very much a fishing island traditionally?
Yes, it's absolutely. And my grandfather was a fisherman, and before that again, everybody was fishing. And it was very poor people in there, and city people or Denmark took taxes especially from the island people. So actually it was a war at some point where all the fishing people were rowing into the city. It's like 200-300 years ago. And they just grabbed the tax, the tax guy that were getting taxes from, grabbed him out, and 3 people, I think it was at least 3 people that was sentenced to death. But then the king, I'm taking the short story here, the king actually came in and said, no, I'm on their side. So they won the whole thing. Yeah, they won the whole thing. But it is a fishing, very, very poor people just 150 years ago or so.
I know that certainly around fishing and boats, there's a huge amount of good luck and bad luck. And just before this, our conversation earlier today, I thought, let me look up and see what some of the folklore around fishing boats in Norway is. And I don't know whether this survived to your ear. I was looking at something from about 1500 that said that they would never put Rowan wood on a fishing boat unless, some people would never put it ever. And some people would say, well, you can have Rowan wood in your boat if you also have juniper. That counterbalances the thing. Like a Rowan would pull a ship down it would make it pull it to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, but that's very interesting because it's a lot of Rowans growing. I said that it was little trees, but not Rowans.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. So I read that traditionally it's if they're standing outside the house, it's kind of a protect against nightmares.
Right, we have that as well.
Because they have this, what do you call it? We call it witch broom.
A witch broom.
Yeah, and witch broom, and they capture the Mara or the nightmare.
that made it, I don't know whether it originally came from Scandinavia or was naturally in Scotland and England, but the rowan tree is always about protecting people against bad luck, against witches. And what we mean by witches is not the healer. When they use the word witches, they meant the evil spirits who the harmful spirits. And so in Scotland, right up until like the 1920s, maybe even later, that the farmers would put it with their cows. You would carry it on you, maybe some outside your house, and there were special times that you would, put it out. So maybe on May Day or maybe midsummer, there were special times. But it's always, but it's a bit scary as well sometimes, because there's a spirit in it that can maybe go a bit uncomfortable. And so you have the rowan. Johanna, how about Sweden? Tell us about rowans.
Yeah, we have.
You're a herbalist, so you know more than we do in a different way also.
But it's very similar. I mean, it's rich in vitamin C, but it's very similar with being protective. And it was a lot of like a woman's herb, and women used to string rowan beads like protective necklaces, especially if they were going out on their own with cattle or so that was something. And I think also, like, as children we strung rowan necklaces, so it's definitely also a protective herb, which is,
it's interesting that it's associated with women, because there is an old it's in one of the old Scandinavian myths that the first man was an ash tree and the first woman was a rowan tree. So some of the listeners to this conversation may know exactly what the reference is in early Norse and Scandinavian myth, but for our conversation, it's just interesting that it's there. That survived. Those survivals to me are so interesting, and revivals, or maybe the plant itself tells us. Do you use rowan at all in your herbal medicine and in your plant practice?
A little bit. I do. I normally tie little rowan like bundles for protection, more so than making potions at the moment anyway. It could be to do with that it's not locally available to me at the moment.
Yeah.
Because I love rowan so much.
Yeah.
But I also try to use things that are available to me. Or so if I went, like next year when I go to Scandinavia in the autumn, and then I will definitely pick some rowan.
If you come down to Treadwell's, I will show you our local rowan trees. One of the things that really surprised me about living in London was I'd lived in Scotland in 1989 for a little bit before I came to London, and I came to London, I thought I'm never going to see a rowan tree. All of Leytonstone is lined with rowan trees, and there's like 3 rowan trees on Stort Street just outside of the Treadwell's shop. So I think at some point, Lindy, you were saying about that there are these planting programs, and somewhere in some London planting program, maybe in the 60s or the 70s, they use rowans. So obviously they're not the same as your Swedish rowans, but there are some in London, which is very, very exciting for me. So I always pick rowan on May Day because that's an English custom, and I make the little cross and make it with red thread. Do you have that in Scandinavia, that you use red string with it always? So, and that's put it to keep the house, and I put it up in the shop to keep the shop safe, to say, here we are. There you go.
We have it with birch. We have it with birch though, but not with a red thread. But we have in May we have this. It's popular to have birch twigs with everywhere on a national day.
Okay.
But also around springtime. But then it's when before the leaves. Yeah.
So Lindy, what are some of the other things that were traditionally done, or that you remember, or people still do in springtime? Because we're coming up for spring. We need spring so badly.
Well, let's see. I have to think about it. Can maybe
come back? Let Johanna, springtime in Sweden.
I'm working off of something, but I have to think a bit.
Yeah. Or midsummer even, because I know midsummer is so famous, but here in England, at least if you go back 100 years, it's all about May Day, which the Germans have Walpurgisnacht. And here it's what still survives is children dancing around a maypole. And so there's dancing with a ribbon and this spiral shape around this pole. And then there's the crowning of the May Queen and the May King. And the crown is made out of hawthorn, or Scots call white thorn, these white flowers. And that tree used to be known as the tree that the fairies live in. So you don't bring the hawthorn into your house, except maybe on May Day. You put it up above, but it has its special time. So the hawthorn is around May Day, but ordinarily you're quite always respectful of it. And sometimes in Ireland still there are hawthorn trees that they say, oh, we want to build a road. And everybody who's in that area will say, no, we're not going to cut down the tree for your road. We refuse. But here midsummer is much less of a thing, and midsummer used to be when you would pick your herbs. Do you know if you have anything around midsummer and picking? Johanna?
It's so interesting what you say about May Day, because that really is so similar to what we do on midsummer, because May Day is important for us as well. The night before we do a bonfire, and that's definitely a tradition, like bringing the new, ending the old, but we don't have the pole. That's midsummer for us. And then it's plant-wise, it's when plants have their strongest potencies for us. So it's this, I still, when I was a child, picked 7 flowers all the time, like up until my teenage years. And that's the picking 7 flowers, and you put them under your pillow, and you're meant to dream about your future love, basically. So that's still today, I think, very used. And then we also make this schnapps so it's like an infusion really with alcohol and herbs. And it's predominantly wormwood and a little bit of fennel and star anise, but then you can do, personally, I think you can do a little bit of everything. I've started now, when I'm older, I've started taking the concept of the 7 flowers and the dreaming, and to make my own schnapps, but with 7 flowers. Because wormwood is a typical dream herb as well. So to me, they're so connected, and it's almost like for the young women or children, and then for the grown-ups, but it's still to do with this lucid or dreaming or magical night. So I started up in the last few years, I've started just to do my own take, but still very much keeping that practice, even though I've been living in England for 18 years now. Midsummer is still it's more important than Christmas. It's like probably the most important tradition for a lot of people in Sweden or in Scandinavia. What do you think, Lindy?
Yeah, but that's interesting what you say about the 7 flowers, and because I heard that my great grandmother, one of them, she was really afraid for some reason. For every around Jule, she had this thing that she had to bake exactly 7 types of cakes before the 13th of December. If not, someone they called julerøtla would come down from the hill and finish.
Like rot everything.
Then it would be finished with her or something like that. That's what I heard. That she was really afraid. She was looking at there's julerøtla, but the thing is that I think she grew up in the east coast of Norway in the woods. So maybe I heard a story about one other person in the family that disappeared in the woods for 3 days. And when he came out of the woods, he didn't speak for many weeks. So, yeah. So who knows what the story goes, who knows what he met there or saw there, then you come with all these characters again.
Maybe he met with the skogsrå, the forest row.
Yeah, maybe.
When I was doing the Treadwell's Book of Plant Magic, I found myself diving into a little bit of Russian plant lore. And I'd love to meet somebody who did this, but if you've lost something and you really desperately need it, you can go into the middle of the woods and you stand on a tree trunk, and then you bend over and you look between your legs behind you, and you leave a note, leaving the note between your legs, and it's to the Tsar and the Tsarina of the forest. You write this very polite letter. And you say, I've lost this thing and I would be so grateful for your help. And then you leave the letter and you go away. And if you come back and you might find your thing, or if you bend over and look through your legs again, you might, if you're very lucky, to see them. But there is this great tradition of the asking their help in writing, and that you leave it in the woods, that they might help you. Obviously, it sounds like in Norway, they might also frighten you. I love this dual side to these creatures, that they have to be treated with respect. They're frightening. They might be helpful. And also, I like that it's not clear exactly who they are, and maybe we believe or we don't believe, but there is it's a feeling thing, isn't it? It's not like, when you say to a Christian, do you believe in this? Do you believe in that? It's a different kind of, it's a feeling sense, isn't it? And I found that when I was doing the book, about people would do things even if they weren't quite, it wasn't about believing, it was about feeling and doing. And I like that. I'm a very intuitive person, I've done a lot of academic study, but really when it comes to the landscape and to nature, it's a feeling thing.
Yes, I asked a friend of mine the other day that is working with older people at the island I'm from. So she's driving around and helping all the other old people in the island. And she said it was an old saying that she heard that she also took into her mind, that she's learned that went, they're talking about it, like, don't let anything go. It was how to translate it to English. Don't let anything you say be in the way. And that I think, okay, you have to think about what do you mean, but it's like, don't do or say anything that is going to be there in the way further on. So that's something she had heard many times, she said. Just a saying that.
Johanna, you wanted to come in on that.
Yeah, definitely. Because they also is linked with that and what you said about hawthorn. And it's because I thought about it today. I love, one of my favorite herbs is heather. And I walked past my window with where I got this little plant herb garden on the roof terrace, and I walked past and I looked at my heather, and I actually thought about, it would be so strange, I wouldn't have it inside, as in have the plant inside. In Scandinavia, it's this, people say that bring in heather, die young. In Sweden, it's a rhyme, but even though heather was used for luck in certain ways, but to bring it in the house, a bit like hawthorn, was forbidden. However, here in the UK, it's for luck, isn't it? It's not forbidden to bring in the house. And I love it so much, and I use it quite a lot. I do infused oils and tincture and tea, and so I use it in so many different ways. So I do bring it in the house to make the products. But then I always think, well, I've lived here for 18 years, so maybe I can use a little bit of this belief and my home beliefs. But I still thought about it today, like I wouldn't actually have a physical plant living inside.
It's lovely that kind of that relationship we have with them. And I'm wondering, Lindy, as I was doing a little bit of research for this conversation, I was really struck that what you have stressed when people talk about Anglo-Saxon and also Scandinavian plant magic and general magic from earlier centuries is how important the singing is, the chant, the rhyme, We have the word, enchantment comes from singing. And there are these little rhymes. And Johanna mentioned, the little rhyme. When we have a rowan tree and red thread puts the witches at their bread. When we have in English. And there are all these little things. So if you do something for a spell or a charm, there's usually a bit of a nail or a plant or hair or something. There's the object. There's the action you do. And then there's the third part, which is the voice. And I was wondering if there was any, you're a singer, you're an amazing singer, and you grew up with some of this folklore, and I wondered if there's any points in your upbringing or your personal practice where your voice interacts with your work with the plants and the scents, or even just being in nature.
Yes, actually it is. Without me, I really didn't realize it before a few years ago. And because I was not thinking about that this was something that was a bit on the side or whatever, or were connected to these things. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I heard was a Swedish historian that's called Lars Magna Enoksen. He heard some concerts probably 10 years ago, and he said, "But you are doing Galder. You're doing Galder." And I had to, at that time, I had to ask. Of course, I learned a bit more now, but I had to ask, "What is that? What is Galder?" And he had like, "No, but it's the voice that is. The voice is so big and it goes straight through everything, or something like that." Is that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but that is what Galder is. What they, you have something you think about, and then you aim. Yeah, something like this, simple. Explain, and then I said, okay, how I practiced because I started with classical music, was singing lessons, and then I felt that I have to do something else with my voice. I want to get it out, and I have to get it out another way. And also before I started, it was like I could see something in the mountains, and I was thinking that my voice had to go over those mountains because I wanted to go there. So I kind of started to mind travel, and I started to just fantasize about where do I want to go travel now, and I started to sing along with that. And apparently that is something they did also not only in because you have all the rhymes and stuff. I'm not good in memorizing words, by the way, but in northern Norway, the Sami people, which I had my great grandmother was also Sami, not the same with the julerøtter, but another one of them, and they actually sing without words. The joik is normally without words, but they are singing to something, to someone out in the nature, and it's very focused on. That's why they were aimed as witches, in a bad way, unfortunately. A couple of 100 years ago, 300 years ago. So, and many of them were actually burned magically because it was said, they are singing to the stones.
Wow.
So that's a dark history of Norway that many people don't. Not to be gloomy today, but it's important to say this. It's similar culture in a way with, or used to be with, singing to something, or singing or wishing and stuff. But the Sami people didn't normally use words.
Didn't do it with words. That's amazing. I just learned something incredible. Johanna, do you want to come in on this?
No, I think it's interesting what Lindy is talking about, because the Sami culture it stretches across north of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and into Russia. And this idea of singing to nature is so beautiful. So I'm really glad that Lindy brought that up.
I love that. I think I'm trying to think what we have in England and Scotland, and there may be things that are used to be done that I'm not aware of. But when I was thing that I am aware of is the speaking. I wish there was more singing. I mean, like if we find those singing to nature, in the folk tradition. I really would love somebody, maybe a listener out there, can take that up and bring them to us, bring them alive again creatively. But the ones that I know about are not very exciting, but they're interesting to me, which is that when you're going to pick a plant, that you speak to it. And these are called picking charms in the picking charms. So you'll say, oh, vervain, you're so lovely, you're a wonderful plant, in the name, and bring in some Christianity for good luck. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, I'm going to pick you. Please help me with my problem, or please help me with my healing, or please help me with find my true love. And you have to be polite and courteous, and then you have to ask it to help you. And that applies that if you picked it without being polite or without asking for its help, maybe the plant has the power, but you haven't asked it, and maybe it might refuse. And there's this really bonkers one that a friend of mine found in an old book from the Tudor period, where the person makes a very elaborate speech to a vervain plant and then marries them, puts a gold ring on the plant. Little herb. This is a small verbena, vervain. I marry you, lovely vervain. I will give you all my wealth. I will take care of you. I will be a good husband. And then after only that, like after 3 days of these lovely promises, that then you can dig it up or pick its leaves to help you. So there's this kind of, are you speaking to the plant itself or to its spirit? They don't say, they just say, this is how it's done.
Yeah, but when you say that,
oh, sorry.
Lindy first and then Johanna.
Yeah. What was the mandrake? We got mandrake.
Mandrake, yeah.
There. That was something also, you couldn't look at it because it could start to scream or something. What was that? It was something.
Oh, yeah. You can't pull it out of the ground because then it screams, right? That's here as well.
We have that in England, yeah. So yeah, so some of them, no matter what you do, they don't want to know.
What was the outcome of the marriage with the?
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's a book of instructions, not a book of results. I wish that we had this person's diary to say this. I did it, and this is what happened. I'd love to know. I really, really would love to know.
Maybe it was a tree hugger extreme, going extreme.
Yeah.
Ancestor. Yeah.
But I think it's good practice. The essence there to ask for permission in nature. I think it's whether how much maybe that was extensive with the marriage, but still to be mindful being in nature, and also the idea of only take what you need and always pick consciously. And so I think that's something that we can still take from that idea and have with us today. And I do when I'm foraging, absolutely.
Oh yeah.
I don't garden, I forage. And so like all of the plants that I take have not been raised by me. They're growing wild, and or they're growing, in the verges of London. And just take what you need, and also just say to it, thank you, I'm going to do this. I'm not asking, in a sense, if you say, may I have your permission, then I suppose we have to allow for the fact that the plant's energy might say, no, you can't. So I try to be attentive to that. If I really need something and I go to my local Rowan tree on May Day, I say, look, I'm going to do this. I am going to pick your leaves, unless I get a very strong feeling that I need to go to a different Rowan tree or a different hawthorn tree. But, thank you. I appreciate you. You're a conscious being. There's this amazing, I'm not a scientist, but there's this amazing research about the consciousness of trees and plants and their sentience, that they communicate with one another. And there's a mother tree, and there's this whole world that is full of these sentient beings that we aren't really aware of. Lindy.
Yes, I'm getting a bit enthusiastic now, because also, my friend that is traveling around with these elderly people, she asked a lady there, how come your orchids are so wonderful? She said that she had the most lovely orchids she has ever seen. And this lady, she said, no, it's because they don't like to stand alone. They like to be in a group. So you have them in a group.
So beautiful.
Yeah. Social plants. Orchids.
Plants. Oh my God. While we're talking about flowers, my main interaction with flowers is I wear perfume. I've got to say, I've got through this, I've got through the lockdown largely and it's been a winter as well, the lockdown in the winter. And so for me, I've been wearing a lot of perfume. I wear summery perfume. I wear moon perfume, because I find myself desperately seeking flowers, desperately seeking the scent of flowers in a way that I've always worn perfume, but not like this. Like I'm just around the house in my pajamas and I'm writing, but every day it's the perfume. And I'm just wondering, what are you guys doing with how is it with you and flowers, and has it been over the past few months? Johanna, I'll start with you because you're the herbalist.
I think personally, I mean, my connection with nature is in a way my practice, and it's the reason I even wanted to get more serious about herbalism and actually properly study herbal medicine. And because I felt like I love living in London and all the culture that comes with being here, but I felt like my connection with nature was like a holiday rather than every day. So I missed that and I craved it so much. So I felt like I wanted to bring it into my everyday life. And I was feeling like that 10 years ago, way before lockdown. And then through my practice, I do have it in my everyday because I'm always doing something, even if it's turning a jar that's infusing in the conservatory or working on something new or reading or could be anything. But I personally feel like throughout lockdown, I have been much more kind of on it with my everyday ritual. I have definitely burnt more incense, more candles, used more plant-based products, which is also a reason why I even started my brand, because I was looking for something that was a bit more natural, something that has 5 ingredients, and it's, what's in there and what heals you or helps you or makes you feel better or encourages you. And I feel like I've definitely used that myself way more. And it's been really important, and it's really lovely to try to almost create your space when you're during an uncertain time and when nobody's sure about what's going on in the world. And even then I've definitely found during the winter and during this time, I've looked much more on like grounding, comforting ideas. But then also interesting what you said about perfume, because through my work with Lindy and meeting Lindy, I have had like this huge upswing in my interest in perfume, in actual perfume rather than just scent, very much through Lindy and all these like recommendations of interesting scents that are maybe a little bit more in line with the scents that I work with, but actually in perfume. Because of Lindy will hopefully talk more about how her secret connoisseurship about perfume.
I've heard about Lindy and scent and flowers. I have been. And before I do that, I want to say a big thank you for Bloom and Bane, which has been like a scent that's been really, it's so like, it's really funny. Here we are in the lockdown, it's winter, and I'm like, this is a really strong perfume. This is going to get me through. So thank you, Johanna, for that one. That's been a personal favorite through the winter. But yeah, Lindy, tell us, you're crazy about perfume and scent.
I absolutely am, and also I have to second that the Bloom and Bane is amazing. I also have that from Johanna, super nice. And yes, I started to work in a perfumery in the 90s, late 90s, and this was what do you call it? The boss there. She was original from Trinidad and Tobago, and she was able, I think that was maybe the reason, she was able to get some perfumes that they didn't normally have in Norway into the shop. And I was lucky enough to go, she had really good taste, that woman. And I was lucky to, when I opened the shop in the mornings, I could go walk around, and I did every day, just smelled stuff. And I started to imagine, who can this suit? The people I know. And then I started to ask customers, which I now see that maybe was a bit crazy, but for me it was fun. I asked, can I please sniff your arm? if that's okay with you, just to find out the skin of people. And because I do believe, not everybody agrees on that, but I do believe that skin turns the sense into slightly different stuff. And then I had a longer period with sickness, so I missed walking out in the nature. And I figured, what can I do not to get? That was when I was finished with the perfumery. I was doing music. And what can I do to not getting depressed, because I miss the nature so much? And then I started, perfumes. And I figured out, luckily I had the internet, so I figured out that, okay, I will see if maybe there are some testers I can just order. And I found these online shops from the States that are specialized in getting all these perfumes that you don't get. Some of them are like 30, 40 years old. You can't buy them anymore. But you could have listed these and those flowers. Like, you are missing flowers. These and those flowers I want to try. Things for spring, things for summer, things for listed. And I just bought the samples. And that has just been a huge hobby of mine now for probably 11, 12 years. And as Steve was, I think I'm training up my nose to kind of, I was testing Johanna stuff and I didn't know anything about them. They didn't put the ingredients on. And I told her that, this one, one of the people, this one reminds me so much about my grandfather's garden, because he loved flowers. My grandmother also. My grandfather planted a lot of stuff in the garden. And she said, yeah, but it's a kind of based on my grandmother's garden. And we are like, okay, but yeah, makes sense. It's a Scandinavian, Sweden and Norway as neighbors. So, and Johanna's a little bit younger than mine, but I think we have the same kind of flowers. My grandfather also had pagettas, a lot of them. So, yeah.
I find that that whole way that a certain time on a certain day, I'm always like, a certain day, like I'll really, really want one scent, and another day it has to be a different one. And I'm sure there's some sort of science around this, and Johanna probably, is more aware of this, but I know that some days I know what I need. And there's going to be some sort of amazing things happening in the brain between the scent and the brain. I was really lucky a few years ago. I did a consultancy with a perfume company that they brought me in to talk about the bottles, because I could talk about witches' potion bottles. So I was there for the promotions talking about witches' potion bottles, but I was next to this wonderful neuroscientist, Dr. Andreas Schaefer, who his contribution to the launches was to talk about the way that scent and perfume, obviously perfume being a scent, and smell goes to a very, very primal part of the brain.
Yeah.
What we would call, as lay people, we call that the reptile brain. And it's so bringing people out of comas, familiar scents. It's a part of a brain that is way, way, way down at the base. And so it can be comforting. It can bring back memories. And I'm very, again, this isn't, I love your speciality, but I'm the consumer, right? And I'm the person who goes into the shop or goes into the Botanica or goes into goes smelling all the essential oils. And one day I'm like, this is the best one ever. And then a week later, it's a different one, saying, like, hitting some primal comfort zone. So thank you for what you do. To bring it, particularly in winter, summertime we can sort of smell the flowers. In the winter time, it's desperate. We're coming up for our hour. So I want you to tell us about what you're doing now. Tell what you're working on, what's happening for you, what are you excited about? If I walked into your studio or into your room, what plants would I see? What scents would I see? And what are you playing around with? Lindy, let's start with you.
I'm playing around with my collection. I have that's the only thing I own beside of a synthesizer. I have a synthesizer, and then I have my perfumes. I don't own a car, don't have a house, but I have my perfumes. So it's like 200 bottles, I think. So that's, yeah, but for me, I've been investing for it's probably 12 years or so. And I haven't regretted one, but I can go through, like you say, from day to day, a change. From nighttime, I use something, and I just feel, and it gives me so much inspiration. From even when I'm in studio, like I've been today, I'm making music, and I'm also working with Johanna and with some plants. We've been talking a lot lately. So what started as one idea is developing into something.
We'll wait to hear more. I just wanted, before I asked Johanna what she's working on, I was thinking, when you were saying about your perfumer, I love the story about your working in the perfume shop and with the scents there, and your boss being from Tobago. And it reminded me, I mean, going back to mindful that we're here at the Jorvik Viking thing, how much travel and cultural communication has given us. The Vikings were, if you get in a boat and you travel for long periods of time and you bring things back, you bring spices, you bring plants, you bring scent, you bring ideas, you bring different ways of approaching the world. But our whole range of scent and plant and eating and probably even some of our customs are because people are willing to share across cultures. It's really, really beautiful, whether it's in the 9th century or whether it's 10 years ago or 15 years ago for you. That enriching of sharing is really, really precious, and I'm always grateful for it.
Thank you. I really appreciated the time at the perfumery. I wouldn't discover those. Maybe I wouldn't have this interest then. I don't know.
What's the herbalist doing? Are you making new blends? What are you doing, Johanna? What's happening with Cult Botanic?
I just love what you were on about healing of scent, and with the brain, and Lindy's interest in perfume and the healing aspect, because somebody told me, and I know it's true and I respect that person very much, but they said often something that does you good doesn't always smell good. However, I'm so into scent. So for me, making a product, it would be a missed opportunity not to have it have a pleasant scent. So I think if I'm working with something that is meant to do good for you, like a bruise ointment, and I have comfrey in it, anyone that's ever worked with comfrey knows that it's not the most pleasant scent. It's got a very off scent. However, lavender is also very good for bruises. So then it's got a dual purpose. So I might put that in as well. So you get a scent. It takes the edge off the other scent. Because for me, well-being is to do with scent as well. And when it also pushes you to use it if you like using it, because you get just using it is a good experience. So I am working on intention oils a lot, and especially now. And I am actually mainly doing products for mine and Lindy's collaboration at the moment, which is a really exciting project, because it's based on, basically I'm crafting products based on conversations that me and Lindy have had, and then we come up with a concept, and it's mainly, we'll have themes, and then we'll come up with, we might talk about dream work or connection to nature, or one story will bring something up, and then we go, oh, wouldn't that be an interesting theme to work on? And then I think, how can I materialize that into a physical product that then again becomes perhaps a spiritual product as well as a physical product, depending on what it might be. So that's interesting. And so I'm exploring that. So currently I'm working on an intention oil and also some incense.
Oh, incense, don't get me started. Treadwell's does a huge range of essential oils. And I've got to say that since we've been closed in the lockdown, that supply has been depleted because I've been quietly buying them just to sniff them to get me through. So we're going to be restocking as we get ready to reopen in the summer. And for me, what's so lovely about talking with you both about is when I did the Treadwell's Book of Plant Magic, it's purely historical in terms of the research. And part of the reason I did it was because I wanted to bring it to current practitioners, that information. And so that, like, Rowan was used in this way, or the scent of this plant was, verbena is amazing scent, and it's such good luck and it's such good fortune traditionally. And I don't want that information to get lost, but at the same time, if it's in the present, then it gets used creatively and intuitively. Because one of the things that was really come out of this conversation for me, but also, whenever I speak to people who love plants or song or anything that's alive, is that the traditions and the customs are there, but they have to live anew. I've recently discovered, thanks to this project, I've discovered Lindy's solo album, where there's some like old folk songs that she's made her own and she's brought her own life to them. And I feel the same thing about, what you're doing with the plants in the sense. It's like, what's happening now? What is this speaking to us now? I think there's never a better time for it. We're going to climate change. We're coming out of a pandemic. If it all goes well, we'll be a year from now, we'll be in a different place, but nature's going to see us through, I think. We've promised to end up on the hour, and we're exactly on the hour. So I want to do the final thank yous and let people know where they can find you both and us. So Treadwell's is Treadwell's-London online, and we have a shop that has the Treadwell's Book of Plant Magic and some other stuff. Johanna's business which has amazing products, is I've written it down, Cult Botanic. Shop Cult Botanic, Johanna Elf. And to find Lindy's work, you can always just type in Vardruna. You don't even need a website. Just type in Vardruna, and she's got an amazing solo album as well, Seafarer. And I think we've learned. Thank you so much for sharing about your experiences, both of you. And this has been really fun for me. And everybody who's been listening, thank you so much for showing up and sharing this conversation with us. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Jorvik Viking Thing 2021. We will leave it there and say goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.